Most people fear being alone, but what if solitude isn't emptiness? It's the highest form of freedom. What if silence isn't your enemy, but the only place where truth still speaks? In a world addicted to noise and validation, those who dare to step away aren't lost. They're the ones finally waking up. Have you ever noticed how the wiser someone becomes, the more they drift away from the noise of people? It's not arrogance. It's not shyness. It's something subtler, a quiet turning inward, a choice to guard what's real from what's shallow. Maybe solitude isn't loneliness at all. Maybe it's the mind's way of coming home after being lost for too long in the crowd. Arthur Schopenhauer understood this better than most. He believed that the more clearly a person sees the world, the less they can tolerate its illusions. Most people, he said, live surrounded by constant noise. Not just the literal kind, the shouting, the phones, the traffic, but the inner noise that comes from chasing approval, gossip, competition, and trivial distractions. The average mind cannot stand silence because silence demands reflection, and reflection demands honesty. So people stay busy, they talk, scroll, and fill every gap with noise. But the thinker, the observer, sees through that. The thinker begins to notice how much of social life revolves around avoiding truth. And when that realization hits, it changes everything. Conversations that once felt lively start to sound empty. Gatherings that once felt warm begin to feel heavy. The mind starts to crave the one thing society rarely offers: peace. So, the intelligent person steps back. Not because they hate people, but because they can no longer pretend. Imagine for a moment you're an artist trying to paint a masterpiece. But every few minutes someone interrupts you. One wants to gossip. Another wants to drag you into an argument. A third wants you to attend an event you don't care about. How long before your art begins to fade? That's what happens to the thinker in the social world. Each demand, each small distraction, chips away at the clarity that keeps their inner world alive. Schopenhauer believed that the person who sees deeply must protect their mind the way an artist protects a canvas from unnecessary interference. Throughout history, the greatest thinkers, artists, and visionaries have walked alone. Newton locked himself away for years to uncover the laws of motion. Kafka filled his solitude with letters and dreams that no one understood. Nietzsche wandered the Alps, speaking only to the wind. Emily Dickinson wrote hundreds of poems in her quiet room, rarely opening the door. They didn't reject the world out of pride. They simply needed to breathe without interruption. Because here's the truth: solitude removes the mask. When you're surrounded by people, you perform. You adjust your tone, your humor, your opinions, all to fit the mood of others. It's rarely intentional, but it happens constantly. You become fragments of yourself, a version for friends, one for work, another for family. In solitude, that performance collapses. There's no one to please, no one to impress. You're left with your unfiltered self, and that is both terrifying and freeing. Schopenhauer wrote that the more unintelligent a man is, the less mysterious existence seems to him. To the shallow mind, life is simple: eat, work, enjoy, repeat. But to the deeper mind, life is a riddle, an intricate web of beauty and suffering, purpose and chaos. Such minds crave meaning, not amusement, and meaning is not found in small talk or gossip. It's found in contemplation, in stillness, in silence. Yet modern society praises the opposite. We're told to network, to mingle, to stay connected. But what does that connection really mean? Most of the time, it's a transaction. Attention traded for attention, validation traded for validation. We pretend it's love or friendship, but often it's a performance that helps us forget ourselves. For those who can see through that illusion, being alone begins to feel more honest than being surrounded. This doesn't mean intelligent people despise others. They often love humanity deeply, but they love truth more. And truth, in its purest form, can't survive constant noise. To think deeply is to require quiet. To feel deeply is to require space. And that space is found only in solitude. So they begin to retreat, not into bitterness, but into preservation. They stop attending gatherings that drain them. They turn down invitations that offer distraction but not connection. They stop pretending to care about what everyone else is obsessed with. Instead, they start nurturing the world inside their own mind. But this retreat comes at a price. Society misreads it. Friends begin to say, "You've changed." Family might ask, "Why are you isolating yourself?" The world is quick to call solitude, loneliness, and deep thinking arrogance. But Schopenhauer would say the opposite is true. The person who cannot be alone has never truly met themselves. The one who can sit in silence without fear has already found something sacred. Think about your own life. When have you felt most alive? Was it in a crowded room, laughing at something you didn't find funny? Or was it alone at night, when the world finally went quiet and you felt your thoughts expand? Maybe you were reading something that spoke to your soul, or walking under a sky so still it made time feel irrelevant. Those moments aren't emptiness. They're clarity. They remind you that your value doesn't depend on visibility. Schopenhauer believed that people depend on others in proportion to their emptiness. The more a person has within, the less they need from without. When your mind is rich with thought, when your imagination feeds you, you stop needing company to feel alive. You stop needing validation to feel real. And that kind of freedom terrifies society, because a self-sufficient mind cannot be controlled. It cannot be bribed with praise or inclusion. It no longer needs to conform to belong. That's why solitude is not just peace. It's power. It is the quiet strength of someone who doesn't need the crowd to feel whole. But power always has a cost. When you choose solitude, you choose just to see things others refuse to see. You begin to notice how often people lie to themselves. You notice how conversation becomes a way to avoid silence. You start to see the machinery of human behavior, the constant pursuit of distraction, the fear of being forgotten, the hunger to appear happy. It's not judgment, it's observation. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. That vision can feel heavy. The more you understand, the lonelier the path becomes. Yet that loneliness is different from the one people fear. It isn't emptiness, it's expansion. When you step back from society's noise, you begin to feel connected to something larger. Nature, art, time itself. You begin to sense that existence doesn't need an audience to matter. Schopenhauer once said that solitude is the fate of all superior spirits. He didn't mean superior in status or intelligence, but in awareness. Those who see life clearly are destined to walk apart, not because they want to, but because they must. Their vision doesn't fit into ordinary conversation. Their depth can't survive shallow company. It's not a rejection of the world, it's a reorientation. They stop chasing external meaning and start cultivating internal truth. And that shift changes everything. Their happiness no longer depends on applause. Their peace no longer relies on agreement. They begin to belong not to society, but to life itself. If you've ever felt that pull, if you've ever sat alone and felt not lonely but free, then you know what Schopenhauer meant. You're not escaping life. You're learning how to live it fully. You're not withdrawing. You're returning to your center, to your mind, to the stillness where truth resides. That stillness isn't empty. It's alive. It's the soil where thought takes root and understanding blooms. It's the place where you stop pretending and start becoming. And once you've tasted that stillness, Once you've met yourself there, the crowd loses its power over you. You no longer seek distraction, you seek depth. You no longer crave noise, you crave clarity. You begin to realize that solitude is not your weakness. It's your greatest teacher. There comes a point when solitude is no longer something you choose. It's something that naturally unfolds. The deeper your mind grows, the harder it becomes to exist in places built on pretense. The laughter starts to sound forced. The conversations circle around the same empty topics. You see people wearing the same masks, repeating the same performances, and you realize how much of life is theater. Schopenhauer saw this clearly. He believed that most of society's activity exists to distract from the emptiness people feel when they're alone. But those who can stand that emptiness discover something extraordinary. Beneath it lies peace. A quiet, unshakable peace that doesn't depend on anyone else's approval. The noise fades, and for the first time, you can hear your own mind. That's when solitude stops being isolation and becomes connection. Connection not to people, but to truth. It's in this silence that life begins to make sense in ways it never did before. You start to see patterns. The same desires, fears, and insecurities that drive humanity begin to appear like symbols in a repeating story. You realize that people aren't evil, they're lost in distraction. They chase pleasure to escape thought. They crave validation to escape the mirror. Once you see that, compassion replaces frustration. You no longer judge them, you simply step aside. You stop expecting the world to think as you do, because you understand that awareness always separates before it unites. In solitude, time itself changes. When you are constantly surrounded by noise, time feels like a blur, a rush from one distraction to the next. But when you're alone, moments stretch. A single hour in silence can feel as full as a week of conversation. You begin to savor small things again. The sound of wind, the way sunlight moves across a wall, the stillness before sleep. The ordinary world becomes profound. Schopenhauer believed this shift was not only emotional but intellectual. The solitary person, he said, begins to think independently. Most people don't truly think. They repeat. They absorb society's opinions and echo them without question. But solitude breaks that echo. It forces the mind to wrestle with its own uncertainty. It teaches you how to think, not what to think. And that's dangerous to the collective mind. Because once a person starts thinking for themselves, they stop being easy to control. This independence is why solitude often feels like rebellion. Society rewards conformity. It wants you to fit in, buy in, and stay predictable. But solitude breaks that pattern. It creates individuals who question, who doubt, who seek depth in a world built on surfaces. And when you start to live that way, people notice. Some will call you distant. Others might say you've become cold. But they're wrong. You haven't become cold. You've become selective. You've learned that energy is not infinite, and that giving it away carelessly is a form of self-betrayal. This doesn't mean you stop loving people. It means you stop needing them to fill your silence. You can sit with someone without speaking, and it feels complete. You can love someone deeply without wanting to possess them. Solitude teaches you that love is not attachment, it's recognition. When you truly know yourself, you no longer demand that others complete you. You meet them as equals, not as cures for your loneliness. And yet, solitude has a darker side too. When you go deep enough into yourself, you begin to confront your own shadow. The thoughts you've avoided, the emotions you've buried, the regrets you've silenced, they all rise to the surface. Many turn back at this point. They return to distraction because facing themselves feels unbearable. But those who stay, who endure that confrontation, come out changed. Schopenhauer would say they become free. because once you face your inner chaos, the outer world loses its power to disturb you. The insults, the gossip, the rejection, they no longer reach you. You see them for what they are, noise from people still trying to drown out their own silence. You also begin to understand suffering differently. Most people resist pain, they run from it. But solitude teaches that pain, too, has meaning. It strips away illusions. It sharpens awareness. It reminds you of your limits and your strength. Schopenhauer believed that wisdom grows out of suffering, and that solitude is the soil where that wisdom takes root. When you suffer alone, you meet reality in its rawest form. There are no comforting lies, no distractions, just you and truth. Eventually, something strange happens. What once felt like emptiness begins to feel sacred. You start to enjoy your own company. You realize that solitude isn't the absence of love, it's the beginning of it. Because to love anything fully, another person, art, nature, you first have to love silence. You have to learn how to be still. Only then can you listen deeply enough to understand what's real. Schopenhauer saw solitude not as exile, but as privilege. The solitary person, he said, lives among eternal things, ideas, art, philosophy, nature. While others chase temporary pleasures, the solitary person seeks permanence, and in that pursuit they find a kind of immortality. Their thoughts, their creations, their inner peace, these outlast time. But it's not an easy path. Solitude will test you. It will make you question everything you thought you knew about yourself. It will strip away comfort and expose your fears. Some days, you'll long for the noise again. You'll want to return to the warmth of belonging, even if it means pretending. But once you've tasted the depth of true solitude, pretending feels impossible. The world's noise starts to feel like static, and you can't unhear the silence behind it. This is why Schopenhauer said that solitude is both a blessing and a curse. It gives you truth, but it takes away illusion. It grants you clarity, but it costs you comfort. It connects you to what's eternal, but it separates you from what's common. Few people can bear that trade. But those who can, they become something rare. They become still in a restless world. They begin to live, not react. They create instead of consume. They see, not just look. And in their silence, they often find the one thing everyone else is chasing but never reaching: peace. When you look at history's quiet minds, the ones who changed the world without shouting, you start to see a pattern. They all had moments of isolation. Moments when they stepped away from the noise and listened to something only they could hear. That inner voice doesn't speak in chaos. It speaks in whispers, and you can only hear it when the world around you stops talking. Maybe that's what solitude really is, not escape, but tuning in, a recalibration. A reminder that your worth isn't tied to how visible you are, but how awake you are. The crowd measures success by attention. The solitary mind measures it by understanding. The crowd seeks stimulation. The solitary mind seeks meaning. In the end, the purpose of solitude isn't to stay apart forever. It's to return to the world with new eyes. To engage, but not be consumed. To care, but not be dependent. To love, but not lose yourself in it. Solitude gives you that balance. It teaches you to carry silence within you, even in the loudest places. And when you do return, you begin to notice something subtle. The same world that once overwhelmed you now feels softer. You can walk through the noise without being part of it. You can listen without absorbing, watch without reacting. You move differently, more deliberate, more grounded, more free. That's when you understand what Schopenhauer meant all along. Solitude isn't the absence of life. It's its purification. It burns away the unnecessary, leaving only what's essential. It reminds you that you were never truly lost. You were just buried under too much noise. And when you find that quiet space within, you don't fear the world anymore. You don't chase it, and you don't hide from it. You simply exist in it, fully awake, quietly alive. Because in the end, solitude is not about being alone. It's about finally coming home to yourself.